Well, hello, good evening, welcome everybody. It's really good to see so many of you in the room here with us this evening, and if you're watching online, it's fantastic to have you with us as well. We're going to begin our evening now, if we can. That's great, thanks. And so we're in our second week, aren't we, of 6 weeks of this course called Living His Story. All about evangelism, about growing in our understanding and our gifting in sharing the good news of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And this evening we're going to have some time to worship as we begin, and there'll be a time just like last week where we can get into small groups. So if you're here with your small group, that's great. If you're not, then feel free to kind of huddle up in a COVID-friendly manner, of course, as we have a bit of time to discuss things later. And we'll have some time to pray at the end. But why don't we stand as Ben comes up to lead us, and we'll pray as we begin as well. Let's stand together, shall we? Let's just take a moment to recenter our scattered senses on the presence of the Lord and the gift of the gospel. Lord, thank you that you love us. Thank you that you call us to be a part of your great big story of salvation. We pray, Lord, that you would guide us, that you would embolden us in our faith this evening, that we might share your gospel with the passion and conviction and wisdom of those in your early church, that we might see our friends and family and neighbours come to know you and see you for who you really are. Amen.
I cast my mind to Calvary, where Jesus bled and died for me. I see his wounds, his hands, his feet, my Savior on that cursed tree. His body bound and drenched in tears, they laid him down in Joseph's tomb, the entrance sealed by heavy stone, Messiah still and all alone. Oh, praise the name of the Lord our God. Oh, praise his name forevermore. For endless days we will sing your praise, oh Lord our God. On the third, at break of dawn, the Son of Heaven rose again. Oh, trample death, where is your sting? The angels roar for Christ the King. Oh, praise the name of the Lord our God. Oh, praise his name forevermore. For endless days we will sing your praise, oh Lord our God. He shall return in robes of white, the blazing sun shall pierce the night, and I will rise among the saints, my gaze transfixed on Jesus' face. Oh, praise the name of the Lord our God. Oh, Blessed assurance, Jesus is mine. Oh, what a foretaste of glory divine, heir of salvation, purchase of God, born of His Spirit, washed in His blood. This is my story, this is my song, praising my Savior all the day long. This is my story, this is my song, praising my Savior all the day long. Perfect submission, perfect delight, visions of rapture now burst on my sight. Angels descending, bring from above, echoes of mercy, whispers of love. This is my story, this is my song, praising my Savior all the day long. This is my story, this is my song, praising my Savior all the day long. Perfect submission, all is at rest. I in my Savior am happy and blessed, watching and waiting, looking above, filled with His goodness, lost in His love. This is my story, this is my song, praising my Savior all the day long. This is my story, this is my song, praising my Savior all the day long.
What a story it is. What a song we have to sing here. Amen. Thank you very much, Ben. If you'd like to take a seat. Let's have a quick recap of last week and an introduction to this week. So last week we were reminded, weren't we, that evangelism is rooted firmly in the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And we reflected on how the first disciples shared that story. We thought about God's Missio Dei, that is God's mission in the world, and how we're called to be a part of that mission. Pete Greig wrote a great book on prayer, and in that he talks about when you go somewhere, sometimes you think when you go to meet someone or you go to a new place that perhaps you feel like you're taking God somewhere He's never been before, and that maybe this is a mistake because He was there long before we got there, and He'll be there long after we're gone. But he says what we have to do is look for God's fingerprints and look for God's footprints and join in with what He's doing. That might be joining in with what He's doing with that person or in that place. And I think that that brings us nicely to this week's session title, because it's called Jesus Was in the Transformation Business. Because He was and is in the transformation business. He's in the business of transforming lives, of transforming communities, even transforming nations. And as a result, we have powerful stories of what Jesus has done in our lives to share with others. So this evening we'll be exploring the transformational power of personal stories. Hopefully we'll be able to gain a few new tools to put in our kind of evangelism toolbox. Tools that will help us to share our stories a little bit more confidently, perhaps. And we also have a really good video interview with a guy called Phil Knox. I've had the privilege of having a couple of lectures from him at college this year. He's the head of mission to young adults at the Evangelical Alliance, and he's a really good speaker when it comes to helping us to understand how we might be able to share our stories a little bit better with those around us. So why don't we kick off with this week's introduction video from Hannah Steele, just to talk about this chapter in the book.
Hello and welcome to week 2 of the Big Lent Read. This week we're going to be looking at chapter 3 in this book, Living His Story. And the chapter we're looking at is called Jesus Was in the Transformation Business, How Personal Stories Can Authenticate the Gospel for People. We all love stories, don't we? We tell them to our children. We enjoy reading them in novels, and many of us this last year during lockdowns have enjoyed a bit of escapism in stories on Netflix and in films. Jesus too loved to tell stories. He often explained what life in the kingdom of God was through stories because they connected with people, and so people could understand what life in the kingdom was all about. We all have our own story to tell, a story of how God has worked in our lives. One of my favourite stories in the Gospel is Jesus visiting the demon-possessed man in Mark chapter 5. It's an amazingly dramatic story of transformation in the life of an individual who was ostracised from his local community, who was in great mental, physical and spiritual turmoil. And an encounter with Jesus utterly transforms his life. So much so that when Jesus leaves the island where this man lives, the man begs to come in the boat with Jesus and become one of Jesus' disciples. In many ways, this request is perfectly understandable. Why wouldn't Jesus want to take this man with him? Surely he's looking for new recruits, new disciples to learn about the life in the kingdom. But Jesus says to this man, no, stay here and tell of what the Lord has done for you. Jesus leaves this newest recruit with very little knowledge, in all honesty, of Jesus, but a powerful story of transformation and encounter. And this becomes the seed of the gospel in that place as this man passes on his story. This week we're going to be thinking about our own stories. They may not be as dramatic as that chapter in Mark chapter 5, as that individual's story. But we all have our own individual story and experiences of how God has worked in our life. And in our postmodern culture, people are often more interested in our experiences of faith than our ideas of faith. They want to know how our faith makes a difference in our day-to-day lives. That has certainly been my experience over recent years. I've found myself much less talking about big apologetic questions of the gospel, but instead talking about my own experience of faith with people around me. So this week is a great opportunity in your groups to share your own stories of faith and start to think together, how could I share this with someone I know in a way that is jargon-free, in a way that is accessible, and a way that makes connections with people. Like our own thumbprint, we each have our story, our individual story of God's work in our lives. My hope and prayer for you this week is that you would gain confidence in sharing that story with those around you.
Great stuff. Well, it's interesting, isn't it, how stories connect us. And like Hannah says, the world is full of stories, isn't it? We only need to open a newspaper, maybe read a blog, dive on Facebook or Instagram. Maybe if we just sat in front of the TV for half an hour or spent time listening to the radio, it's obvious that we're surrounded by stories and also competing narratives about how to live well, what we need in life to succeed. And we each have a story too, don't we? A personal story about the difference that Jesus has made in our lives, and they're powerful stories. When I was thinking through whether or not to apply for the discernment process for ordination, I read a book called Called or Collared by a guy called Francis Dewar. And near the start of the book, he wrote something that has always stuck with me. He said, there's an old Christian tradition that God sends each person into this world with a special message to deliver, with a special song to sing for others, with a special act of love to bestow. That no one else can speak your message or sing your song or offer your act of love. These are entrusted only to you. And he goes on to say that expressing that message or singing that song or offering that act of love not only brings the most profound fulfillment to you, but it also brings freedom and enrichment to others. And it's sometimes easy to forget that is God's calling to each one of us, to almost unearth that rich treasure that we have in the gospel of Christ, in our salvation, and share it with others. And I was thinking, but why? Why is this so important? Why is evangelism something that we are all called to do? I just want to share with you a story from when I was a student, and I'm a student again now, but rewind about 15 years, as painful as it is to say. I was a student at a Christian music college in Coventry called Nexus, and we used to go on a music mission to a place called Cryche in Derbyshire once a year, and there we would do loads of schools work. We'd do some gigs, we'd do some pub gigs in the evening, we'd kind of do loads of different community events that would all culminate in kind of a big opportunity to share the gospel with the community at the end of the week. And we went to do a gig at lunchtime in a school, and one of the teachers went, "Oh, you're a Christian college, would you come and teach an RE lesson on Easter for us?" And so kind of off the cuff, we went in and we, I think, played a game that had something to do with trying to eat a cream egg without your hand. I saw a child smash a cream egg with his face on the table and kind of pick it apart. It got really quite messy. And then we were talking about Easter, and it seriously shocked me that these kids had no idea, genuinely no idea, that Easter had anything to do with Jesus. They had no idea about the transformational power of Jesus. They didn't even know who he was. And I'll be honest, it broke my heart. It really, really broke my heart that, pardon me, that these kids had grown up to kind of the lower end of secondary school age, and they never even heard who he was. And I started wondering, why is it that maybe that's just not a part of our everyday lives, of just sharing who Jesus is and what Jesus has done for us? Why is it that they haven't heard stories about that in their community? And I think sometimes we might think that telling our stories is difficult. We might not know where to start, or we might feel like if we do share them but we don't see some kind of come to Jesus instant conversion moment, then we'll have failed. And then we get scared of that failure. But actually there's been some recent research, and I think last week's sessions maybe touched on it a little bit, about how not everybody comes to Jesus the same way. You've got this kind of road to Damascus moment, this kind of blinding light moment, and then you've got the slower road to Emmaus. We call it a point conversion or a process conversion. And 39% of people that were surveyed said they had that kind of instant point conversion, but 61% said it was a slow, gradual process over time. I have a friend called Adam, who I've known since I was a teenager. We still speak now. And when I first met Adam, Adam was a devout atheist, if you could call him such a thing. And over probably 20 years of knowing Adam, we've been having conversations about faith, little ones here and there. And I must admit, for most of those, I've walked away feeling like I have failed. I didn't see Ad for about 5 years recently, maybe a bit longer. And when I met up with him most recently, he told me that actually he did believe in a Christian God. He just wasn't quite sure what God had got for him yet. And it reminded me that evangelism isn't just about reaping a harvest, but it's about sowing seeds. It's about sowing seeds, about looking for connections, in people's lives, about little things that we might be able to speak into. Oh, I was in a situation like that once, and God really helped me, or I found this a real comfort. It's the little things, the kind of baby steps towards Jesus that we are asked to partake in, as well as just that kind of big harvest reaping moment. So to sow seeds effectively, Hannah Steele gives us a blueprint for sharing our stories in this book. And one thing that struck me was that quiet and private faith is not anywhere in this book. I think we've all probably felt like that at times. Maybe our faith is quiet. It's a private faith. It's between me and God. And that's kind of very much the way the world wants us to think about our faith. No, your faith is for you. That's your faith. But actually, can you imagine what would have happened if that bunch of 12 ragtag misfits that followed Jesus around had a quiet, private faith? If you stand on a hilltop anywhere around here, you'll probably see more spires than you can count. And that didn't happen because they were quiet about their faith, but because they were bold in going out and sharing who Jesus was and how he had changed their lives. So Hannah says, rather than a quiet faith, we should be prepared, authentic, honest, bold, relevant, respectful, and to look out for those connections. You see, it's okay to prepare. It's okay to think about what would someone say. If someone said to you, what difference does faith make in your life? Or how did you come to faith? Or, those kind of questions. It's good to think, to prepare, maybe even to write down what you might say and craft it, refine it, so that you feel like you're prepared to answer those kinds of questions. But they need to be authentic and honest answers. We don't have to pretend to be anyone that we're not. Jesus' gospel is exciting and transformational enough just as it is. He doesn't need us to kind of ham it up. He works amazingly through Scripture and through our lives. And all we need to do is just honestly share what God is doing in us. And our stories are not just told stories, chapter 3 tells us, but they are lived stories. And I think we see this in Paul's writing, kind of all over Pauline epistles, but particularly I was thinking the other day in Romans, we see Paul kind of saying, so many times I've tried to get to you, so many times I've tried to come to you, and I can't wait to be with you. And I think that's because even though he was writing this letter of encouragement and guidance for the church, he knew that words alone weren't enough to share the gospel effectively. That sharing the gospel effectively was something that was lived out and something that you did together in this kind of lived experience. And I'd like, if I could, just to take a few minutes to reflect on that passage in Mark's gospel that Hannah was talking about. And in particular, how different it is actually from the previous passage in Mark's Gospel. I don't know if any of you have got a Bible, or if you want to look it up on your phones. If you want to grab a Bible, I think there's probably a few stacks of them in the corner over there. Or if not, you feel free to just have a little listen. But in Mark 4, 35 through to, I think, 41, it says, "On that day when the evening had come, he said to them, 'Let's go across to the other side.' And leaving the crowd behind, they took him with them in the boat. And just as he was, the other boats were with him. A great windstorm arose, and the waves beat into the boat, and so the boat was already being swamped. But he was in the stern asleep." That's Jesus was in the stern asleep on the cushion. "And they woke him up and said to him, 'Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?' And he woke up and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, "Peace, be still." And then the wind ceased, and there was dead calm. And he said to them, "Why were you afraid? Have you still no faith?" And they were filled with great awe, and they said to one another, "Who then is this, that even the wind and the seas obey him?" Who is it that even the wind and seas obey him? And I'm really struck by the contrast between that passage and the next bit that comes, this guy who was possessed by a legion of demons. Because in the first instance, the disciples see Jesus calm a storm and they ask each other, "Who is this?" But straight afterwards, the very passage afterwards, all Jesus needs to do is to step off a boat, and a man possessed by demons runs to him, and the first thing he says is, I just want to get it so I know I say it right. I'm looking for some quotations in here. And I know I read earlier on this page and I can't quite see it. But I'll say it. It says, "What are you to do with me, Son of the Most High God?" Son of the Most High God. In Matthew's Gospel it just says, Son of God. And it just really struck me that the disciples saw him calm a storm and they were still going, "Who is this guy?" But he steps off a boat and a man possessed by demons calls out exactly who he is. It's almost like the demons are kind of telling the disciples who he is. And I think this is really important because when we know who Jesus really is, it changes absolutely everything. When we remember his faithfulness to us in our lives, to others, it changes the atmosphere. It has the ability to change the hearts of others. And so I'd like to ask you to reflect this evening and when you go home tonight, who is Jesus to you? What has Jesus done for you? What storms of life has he carried you through or calmed the waves in? Where has Jesus offered you comfort? What has Jesus saved you from? And what do you know that he has saved you for? These are all just some good things to think on when we might think about shaping our story and sharing it with others. Now, we're going to watch another video for a few minutes. There's a guy called Phil Knox, who I mentioned earlier. Is a great speaker, and I think he's got some good advice on how we might be able to practically share our story with others. Yeah, so when Hannah speaks, she's quite quiet, and when Phil speaks, he's a little bit loud. So you might want to kind of, I don't know, plug your ears when he's on. I think Chris is going to do his best to kind of ride the fader at the back and see if he can level it out for us.
Well, it's great to welcome you today, Phil. Thank you so much for spending time with me. This is Phil Knox. He's the head of missions for young adults at the EA. So thank you so much for your time today, Phil.
Great to be with you, Hannah. It's very fun hanging out with a fellow evangelist, a fellow Villa fan. Lots to talk about, lots to focus on.
Thank you so much. I wonder whether you could share something of your own story of coming to faith, as we're talking today about how we share our stories with people.
Yeah.
What's your story, Phil, of your journey to faith?
I should really be able to answer this question, shouldn't I? I was born in a Christian home. I kind of dragged to church ever since I was kind of a fetus. And I remember really making a decision to follow Jesus when I was 6 years old. I was even more excitable then than I am now. I was in a tent full of other 6-year-olds, and someone told me that Jesus loved me, that he died for me, that I needed forgiving. I knew I was already needed forgiving even at that stage. And that I could be friends with God and live forever when I die. And I thought this was incredible. That was this moment I guess I chose to follow Jesus. Kind of since then, throughout kind of teenage years, life was great, but the rubber really hit the road for me when I was 21 years old. I was at university. I was having lunch with my mum. The phone rings, and it's a family friend, and they say, "Phil, I'm really sorry, but this morning your dad has died." And these words just completely ripped my world apart. And as a family and as an individual, had a choice really in that moment as to whether to say, "God, stuff you for letting this happen," and completely walk away, or "God, we really need you right now." And in all the years I've been following Jesus, over 30 years now, the closest I've ever known God is in those first few months after Dad died. And there was something about God's presence with us and his comfort during that time that I will never forget, and it's been a really significant part of that story. Another kind of jigsaw piece in my story is one of the most amazing things about following Jesus is he gives you real purpose and real meaning. And so I found that in helping other people understand the good news and wanting to live for Jesus. And so I found that in working for Youth for Christ for a number of years and now at the EA. But even again, in the last few years, the rubber's really hit the road for me again, where they found that I've got the same heart condition that my dad died from at 48. And there have been moments in the middle of the night where I've kind of woken up and you're not thinking straight, and you're thinking irrationally, your heart's going, and you just wonder whether, this is am I going to die? And I can't tell you what a difference it makes knowing that God is with me in those moments, and also knowing I don't know what my future holds, but I know who holds my future. And that's my story. It's ongoing, and even this year through COVID, I don't think I'd have got through in the same way without knowing Jesus. My mum died in June. I had a brother-in-law die in January. Those moments of crisis and life, it makes all the difference knowing there's a God who loves me, who's with me, and whose future, whose hands I'm in.
Wow, thank you, Phil. Such a powerful and honest story. And I think what I resonate with your story is it's not just a story of what happened in the past, but actually it's for ongoing, sharing what God is doing kind of day by day in your life.
And you pick up on that in the book, and I really appreciate that about that kind of the relevant moment. And actually, I think it's really important. I don't know about you, but I found when we talk about stories, I think when we begin to talk about that, often people assume just talk about your testimony and the moment you became a Christian. And when I kind of speak to people about that, I think often it's a bit like talking about your spouse and the moment you met with that, which could have been 20 years ago, without any kind of reference to what's happened since. And so I think that's really important. I love the way you pick on that in the book.
Thank you. And the way we're thinking about stories, and obviously, stories of transformation in our own lives. But I guess one of the things I discovered writing the book was going back and reading the Gospels again and just seeing time and time again Jesus encountering people and their story and this idea of transformation. I suppose, what is it about personal story that is so powerful in evangelism? I mean, any thoughts on that?
I mean, I think there's a really fundamental piece here that we're story people. We understand the world around us through story. And when I was researching my book, I was fascinated by just on a sociological level, on a neurological level, what the impact of story was. And so love the kind of brain science of story. Good science just tells us what God knew about all along. And you find the various kind of chemicals that are released in your brain. The reason we're just so compelled by Netflix series is that we have this chemical called cortisol, which gets released into our brains, and we're like, I'm going to pay attention to whatever happens next. The reason it feels so good is the same chemical that links mother and baby, oxytocin, is released in our brain when we feel empathy for characters. And all that brain science, and then the incredible brain science that when you tell a story and when you hear a story, the same chemical patterns are observed in each brain. It's like you're syncing your brain to the other person. So, I mean, it's completely no surprise that when Jesus is communicating the stories about the profound truths of what it is to be human, he tells stories. It's like he kind of had some kind of advantage, right? And today we see that all the social media platforms get it, because they're not just asking people to capture a moment in time. It's like, what's your Facebook story? What's your Insta story? There's a kind of, we recognise, I don't know about you, in the run up to Christmas, you kind of get all those perfume ads, which are I just can't stand them. but they're all trying to tell some kind of story, as if, there's a kind of, there's a narrative that's helping people go, oh, I can picture myself as a kind of semi-naked, 6-pack bloke, all that kind of, it's a narrative, isn't it, people buy into it. And I think for us as people who are trying to communicate the greatest story of all time, it can be so easy to default into facts and figures but actually what people want to know is our own story. And we think about the language of the New Testament, which talks about us being witnesses. And what are witnesses doing? Cool. They tell stories. They say this is what happened. And I think for those reasons, but also I would say that in my experience of sharing faith, both with friends who don't know Jesus yet, but also kind of as a communicator, I've seen them just work. I've seen those moments of people getting it. And I get that. Last night I spoke at an open-air carol service, and it was, you can watch people as you kind of tell a story that illustrates something of the magic of Christmas and the real Christmas. I get it. And in conversations with friends who are just exploring faith, whether that's just over a coffee or while watching Formula One or Alpha, there's a moment where you tell a story, and I think through stories we find each other, we find ourselves in each other's worlds, and people can begin to understand what it is to be a Jesus follower and connect with God through our own stories.
Oh, I love that idea of finding each other in one another's world. That's a really powerful idea. And you mentioned your book, which I've got here. I'm going to do a little plug.
The two greatest evangelists.
So this is Story Bearer. Great book. I really enjoyed reading that. And you talked. I think we're touching on sort of similar themes here around kind of storytelling. And I wondered if someone's watching this recording today and they've never shared their story with someone and they don't know where to go, how to start. How would you encourage someone to just start by talking about their experience of God to friends or family? Have you got any top tips from your experience of doing that?
Yeah, I'm absolutely not just saying this, but the first thing to do is to read chapter 3 of this book. Absolutely true. Because I just think what you do is you talk about being prepared, being accessible, being honest, being relevant, being bold, being real, being respectful. All those words, that's how to do it. And I think when we think about evangelism, those aren't necessarily the words that come to mind. And I think that's really, really key. That when you ask people, when you ask people a couple of questions around sharing faith, and you say, how do you feel about evangelism? Those are never the words that come out. But yet, when you ask people what are the words that you would describe the person who led you to Jesus, those are some of the words that would come out. They were accessible, they were honest, they were respectful, they were relevant, and probably a bit of boldness in there as well. So I think that's the first thing. And I guess what I'd add from some of the things in my book really is just some of the practical bits of writing it out. Of thinking, if someone said to me, "Why are you a Christian?" What would you say? And just write. It's so easy to forget. It's so easy when we're under pressure. I'm an extroverted evangelist. But at the same time, sometimes when non-Christians ask me why I'm a Christian, I'm like, I wrote a book on this stuff, and I get nervous and I forget. And so if I'm not prepared, goodness me, that there must be other people who haven't written books in evangelism that either are way more confident or prepared than me. But I think I think that's the first thing. And then as I'm sure you are when you do talks, Hannah, but practice really gives you confidence. And so. I talk about going to this carol service last night, in the open air, in the cold, it wasn't too hostile a crowd, but you kind of, on the way in the car, I'm practicing. And again, with that, you don't want it to feel over rehearsed or robotic, but practicing, it does give you that confidence of being able to know kind of what to say. And just that process of kind of writing it down and practicing it can be absolutely amazing. Not just for your confidence, but also looking back with thankfulness over your story as to what God has done. And so a couple of weeks ago I was speaking at a church on a Sunday who'd just gone through my book as a sermon series, and there was this woman who just shared afterwards. She just said, I've never thought about my story. Not only have I got confidence, but every day I'm thanking God as to what He's done in my life. And so I think there's something about that in your own story that does something for you as well as other people. And I think the other thing I'd say is that in terms of how we share that story once we've got it kind of lockdown and is to keep updating it, first of all. You know, you kind of there's the ongoing moment, as we talked about at the beginning. But also, it's not just a moment of being reactive, but actually sometimes we can be proactive with it. And when we're in a conversation about faith, you can just say, can I just tell you my story? I've not known, in all my years of sharing faith with mates, no one's ever said no. Do you know what I mean? Either they're too British or they are actually interested. No one says no in that moment. I think those two things of both being reactive when someone says what does faith mean to you? Why are you a Christian? Why did you go to church? Tell your story, but also just saying now and again, can I just tell you my story? That both those things really help.
Yeah, I really like that, and I think I always think with these things, like when you get asked a really difficult apologetic question, I kind of think it's perfectly okay the first time to be a bit stumped and to say, you know what, I actually really need to think about that. You know, can I come back to you next week having given it a bit of thought? And maybe the first time you get asked to share your story, you don't know what to say. But then to learn from that, as you say, to go away and think, okay, if I got asked that question again, what would I say? And to write it down. We always assume these evangelists on the stage, they're kind of spontaneous speakers. Let me tell you, it's rehearsed. So yeah, you know, they know what they're gonna say. One last thing I'd just love you to maybe share a story from, because you're all about stories, is we talked about the power of stories. I know you're a great storyteller, and you've talked a bit about how we might use social media in telling stories. I just wonder whether you've got any examples from your work amongst young adults, just of stories being used really effectively in evangelism. I mean, maybe something during the lockdown as we've, you know, seen a rise in social media being used. Any examples to share with us?
Yeah, I mean, I guess just from the last few months, really, we've done an online alpha, and so my wife and I have just. I mean, do you know what? It's so, for those of us with children, it used to be so difficult. You know, it used to be turn up at church at 5, and you know you put in the chairs. It was like, you know, hours before any guests arrive. These days, put the kids down, 7:10, press play on the video. It's never been so easy. And do you know what? We've got twice as many as we've ever had, so it feels like less effort for more fruit, which is great. Well, who knows what the future looks like. But even within that, I think one of the really powerful things has been, that with Alpha, it does the kind of stories for you. And so you get, you know, we've had some guests pick up the stories of some of the people on Alpha and kind of buy the book, or, you know, do it. So that's really powerful. But then of course what happens is when you're in the small group, people ask you your story. We've had, you know, the Christians in the small group have shared some of their experiences around the various topics. So that's been really powerful. I think another one has been one of the ways in which God's really been challenging me during lockdown has been to step out a bit. And this isn't for everyone, but I've found that as someone who loves food, and I've been working from home has been terrible for me. I can't pass the kitchen without popping in and grabbing something. And so I decided I could either eat less or run more. I've decided to run more. And as I've been running, I've just felt, you know, maybe it's the frustrated evangelist in me. I felt kind of provoked just to kind of go up to people and say, you know, just this morning I'm a Christian. I just felt, is there anything I can pray for you for this morning? And even, I guess I can't emphasise this too much, I find that really hard. Like, I find it really difficult. I don't want to do that. And I wrestle with God a bit. And there have been times where I've run half a mile further down the road before I eventually, a bit like Jonah, and then turned around and come back and gone, oh God, okay, God, I'll do it. You know, and you know, like you were saying, is that in all that time, there's only one person who's ever said no, they didn't want that. But the stories that have come out of that, and the opportunity to be able to share some of my story, that have been amazing. And so just one quick example of that, you know, there was this guy called Stevie who he was on crutches, felt really moved to kind of go up and start pray for him. And Stevie was a amateur boxing association champion when he was younger. He then went into the army, then came out of the army, got knocked over by a car, been on crutches, he's got cancer as well. Just had a chance to connect and seen him several times since, given him a Bible. And it's just been sharing some of my experience around, certainly not boxing or the army, but around a few other things. And just sharing what God's done in my life. And Stevie's going to start coming to church when lockdown's over, you know. But it's just that simple moment of saying, even in the wrestle, you know, and in both of our books we talk about the fact that evangelism is difficult. It doesn't come naturally. It's really hard. But if we take those opportunities, if we know our story, it makes it a heck of a lot easier. And it really, really matters. The impact of what we do really, really matters. And yes, we'll mess up on the way. Yes, there'll be moments where we don't get it right. Yes, there'll be moments where people go, you say, can I tell you my story? And they might not say yes, or you'll get it wrong, or you'll say something wrong, or you won't really answer the question. But it's absolutely worth it, and it absolutely matters.
Thank you so much, Phil. Really enjoyed that story. And thank you so much for your time today. Really enjoyed this conversation. I hope others have enjoyed it, and many blessings on you as you continue telling your stories. May Villa continue to do well this season.
Amen.
But may, more importantly, you continue to pass on the story of Jesus to those you meet. Thanks so much for your time, Phil.
Excellent. Well, I think we might need to club together and buy Phil a microphone for his laptop, mightn't we?
It's
for
great to
Christmas.
welcome you today, Phil.
I wonder what jumped out at you about what Phil said. Was there anything about his own story that really kind of grabbed your heart? Perhaps something about how God sustained him in a time of trouble. I was thinking about the words to a song, and I thought that it might be good just for us to take a moment to be still, perhaps to reflect and to think upon a time when God has guided us through some difficulty, through some turbulence. So let's take a minute after that video just to be still, and I'll read the lyrics out to this song in just a moment. You were reaching through the storm, walking on the water, even when I couldn't see. In the middle of it all, when I thought you were 1,000 miles away, not for a moment did you forsake me. After all, you are constant. After all, you are only good. After all, you are sovereign. Not for a moment will you forsake me. You were singing in the dark, whispering your promise, even when I could not hear. I was held in your arms, carried for 1,000 miles to show that not for a moment did you forsake me. In every step, every breath you are there. In every tear, every cry, and every prayer. In my hurt, at my worst, and when my world falls down. Not for a moment will you forsake me. For after all, you are constant. After all, you are only good. After all, you are sovereign, and not for a moment will you forsake me. Lord Jesus, thank you so much that you have carried all of us through times of difficulty. That right now you are carrying so many of us. Lord, thank you that you sustain everything, that without you we would cease to exist. And Lord, I pray that as we enter into a time of discussion together, that it would be a fruitful time, that it would be a time where we might be able to think upon the ways that you have changed and transformed our lives. As a God who is in the business of transformation. Amen. Well, it's that time again. So if you want to gather around into maybe groups of 5 or a couple of rows, however you see fit, there'll be some questions coming up on screen. Bless you if you can read them from there, because I'm not sure I can read them from here. So hopefully you should have them on your handout. If you don't, there's some spare handouts at the back. And we're going to take probably about half an hour just to slowly work our way through the questions. Should we put some music on as well, maybe in the background? That'd be good.
You are here, moving in our midst. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, working in this place. I worship you. I worship you. Sing that again. You are here, moving in our midst. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, working in this place. I worship you. I worship you. Oh, waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. That is who you are. You are here, touching every heart. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, healing every heart. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, turning lives around. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, mending every heart. I worship you. I worship you, Jesus. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. 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 And that is who you are. Even when I don't see you, you're working. Even when I don't see you, you're working. You never stop working. Never stop and never stop working. Even when I don't see you, you're working. Even when I don't see you, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop, and that is who you are. 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 Oh, waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Oh, waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Oh. Who breaks the power of sin and darkness, whose love is mighty and so much stronger, the King of glory, the King above all kings, who shakes the whole earth with holy thunder and leaves us breathless in awe and wonder, the King of glory, the King above all kings. This is amazing grace. This is unfailing love, that you would take my place, that you would bear my cross, that you lay down your life, that I would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. Who brings our chaos back into order, who makes the orphan a son and daughter, the King of glory, the King above all kings, who rules the nations with truth and justice, shines like the sun in all of its fullness, the King of glory, the King above all kings. This is amazing grace. This is unfailing love, that you would take my place, that you would bear my cross, that you lay down your life, that I would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain, worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain, worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain, worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy, worthy, worthy is amazing grace. This is unfailing love, that you would take my place, that you would bear my cross, Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me.
Moses led his people through the sea, taking them away from slavery. The Lord was good, the Lord was strong, and Moses lived a life for him.
Ready?
Oh, thank you, that all through history you were faithful. Thank you, oh, thank you, that you are just the same when it comes to me. When it comes to me.
Well done, Ruth.
David fought Goliath and he won. A humble shepherd boy became a king. The Lord was good, the Lord was strong, and David lived his life for him. Daniel was inside a lion's den. God brought him to safety once again. The Lord was good, the Lord was strong, and Daniel lived his life for him. Oh, thank you, that all through history you were faithful. Thank you, oh, thank you, that you are just the same when it comes to me. When it comes to me. Jesus died to take away our sin, so we could get to know him once again. The Lord is good, the Lord is strong, and we will live a life for him.
Ready?
Oh, thank you, that all through history you were faithful. Thank you, oh, thank you, that you are just the same when it comes to. Thank you, oh, thank you, that all through history you were faithful. Thank you, oh, thank you, that you are just the same when it comes to me. 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 You.
Well done, everyone.
I'm reading my Bible, and this is what it says to me. It tells me that I'm never ever alone. I'm learning how Jesus came down to us and gave his best. Without a doubt, the best friend you'll ever know. Ah, God knows exactly what I need, so I remember this. Let's go! When you ask, he cares. When you seek, he's there. When you knock, 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 God opens up the door. When you ask, he cares. When you seek, he's there. When you knock, 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 God opens up the door.
Well done, everybody. It's quite fast, this one, isn't it?
Have your Bible ready? I'm reading my Bible, and this is what it says to me. It tells me that I'm never ever alone. Rupert, come here. I'm learning how Jesus came down to us and gave his best. Without a doubt, the best friend you'll ever know. Ah, God knows exactly what I need, so I remember this. Let's go! When you ask, he cares. When you seek, he's there. When you knock, 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 God opens up the door. When you ask, he cares. When you seek, he's there. When you knock, 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 God opens up the door. Ah, God knows exactly what I need, so I remember this. Let's go! When you ask, he's there. When you seek, he's there. When you knock, 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 against us. Let your light shine, let your light shine, let your light shine. My God's the king of the giants. My God's the king of the lions. My God's the king of the creatures of the deep. My God's the king of me. My God's the king of the giants. My God's the king of the lions. My God's the king of the creatures of the deep. My God's the king of me. Have you heard the story about my friend King Dave? Wouldn't let the giant stand in his way. He said, Henry must sing, cause he's not that tall. My God is bigger and I watch him fall. My God's the king of the giants. My God's the king of the lions. My God's the king of the creatures of the deep. My God's the king of me. Have you heard the one about this guy called Dan? Yes, he was a mighty holy praying man. He said, throw into the den of the scary beast. But God saved our hero from the lion's teeth. My God's the king of the giants. My God's the king of the lions. My God's the king of the creatures of the deep. My God's the king of me.
This is more than history. He will do the same for me. Like Jonah ran away, let's see. When I'm lost and afraid and alone in the dark, you're with me. Oh, you're with me.
My God's the king of the giants. My God's the king of the lions. My God's the king of the creatures of the deep. My God's the king of me. My God's the king of the giants. My God's the king of the lions. My God's the king of the creatures of the deep. My God's the king of me. My God's the king of me.
Given me a new name, you set me in a family, pull me out of my pain, you're never walking out on me. You've given me a new name, you told me that you love me, you set me in a safe place, you are my security. You're singing over me. You're singing over me. You're singing over me. A song of love. And this is my new name. And this is where you brought me. I'm living in a wild place. You're making me a masterpiece. I'm singing over me. You're singing over me. You're singing over me. A song of love. You're singing over me. You're singing over me. You're singing over me. A song of love. And this is my story. This is my song. This is my perfect Father's love. This is my story, this is my song, this is my perfect Father's love. This is my story, this is my song, this is my perfect Father's love. This is my story, this is my song, this is my perfect Father's love. Thank you for my new name. Thank you for my family, and I could never repay a love that gave it all for me. And thank you for my new name. Thank you for my family. And I could never repay a love that gave it all for me. You're singing over me. You're singing over me. You're singing over me. Song of love. You're singing over me. You're singing over me. You're singing over me. Song of love. You're singing over me. You're singing over me. You're singing over me. Song of love. Thank you, Lord. You're singing over me. You're singing over me. You're singing over me. Song of love.
Love is too big, big, big for his power. Love is too little, little for his care. Love is too big, big, big for his power. Love is too illy, willy for his care. Love is too big, big, big for his power. Love is too itty, itty for his care. Love is too big, big, big for his power. Love is too teeny, weeny for his care. He is the God of the big, God of the little, God of the stuff, somewhere in the middle, King of the big mountains, loves you more than you will ever know. Love is too big, big, big for his power. Love is too little, little for his care. Love is too big, big, big for his power. Love is too itty, bitty for his care. Love is too big, big, big for his power. Love is too itsy bitsy for his care. Love is too big, big, big for his power. Love is too teeny weeny for his care. He is the God of the big, God of the little, God of the stuff, somewhere in the middle, King of the big mountains, loves you more than you will ever know. Love is too big, love is too small, love is too much, God cares for it all. Love is too big, love is too small, love is too much, God cares for it all. Love is too big, love is too small, love is too much, God cares for it all. Love is too big, love is too small, love is too much, God cares for it all. He is the God of the big, God of the little, God of the stuff, somewhere in the middle, King of the living mountains, loves you more than you will ever know. One more time. Love is too big, big, big for his power. Love is too little, little for his care. Love is too big, big, big for his power. Love is too illy, willy for his care. Love is too big, big, big for his power. Love is too itsy, bitsy for his care. Love is too big, big, big for his power. Love is too teeny, weeny for his care. Our God is a great big God. Our God is a great big God. Our God is a great big God, and He holds us in His hand. Our God is a great big God. Our God is a great big God. Our God is a great big God, and He holds us in His hands. He's higher than the skyscraper, and He's deeper than the submarine. He's higher than the universe and beyond my wildest dreams. And He's lonely, and He's lonely, So much noise inside my head. When I'm scared and when I'm feeling all alone, all I gotta do is speak your name. Say it by day, say it by night, say it till the end of time. All I gotta do is speak your name. When I wake up in the morning, you're my friend throughout the day. When I close my eyes to sleep the night away, all I gotta do is speak your name. Say it by day, say it by night, say it till the end of time. All I gotta do is speak your name. Face the camera so they can see you. Say it by day, say it by night, say it till the end of time. All I gotta do is speak your name. Jesus, your name covers my heart, covers my mind, all of the time. Jesus, your name covers my heart, covers my mind, all of the time. All I gotta do is speak your name. All I gotta do is speak your name. Say it by day, say it by night, say it till the end of time. All I gotta do is speak your name. Say it by day, say it by night, say it till the end of time. All I gotta do is speak your name. Jesus, your name covers my heart, covers my mind, all of the time. Jesus, your name covers my heart, covers my mind, all of the time. All I gotta do is speak your name. All I gotta do is speak your name. All I gotta do is speak your name.
Okay then, well, I know time flies when you're having fun, but if we could possibly all gather back around, that would be great.
I worship you. You are here, working in this place.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we've got 15 minutes left, and what we're going to do is have a little bit of feedback just around, I think, what question number were we? Question 4, I think. So let's. Can I just ask the group in the corner? Would it be okay if we come back over? I know it's hard. Time flies. Time flies when we're chatting away. So that'd be really, really helpful. Thanks.
I worship you. I worship you. Oh, waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness.
So I just wonder, does anyone have any thoughts on in what practical ways might we be able to express God's love to a neighbour this week? I mean, it might be a next door neighbour, but I mean in the general sense, a neighbour, whether it's in Christ or maybe in the street, someone we're sat next to in the GPs. Could be anyone. Is anyone brave enough to share anything you can think of that might be a practical way? Go for it, kid.
You are here, healing every heart.
Just giving someone time.
I worship you. You are here, turning lives around. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, mending every heart. I worship you. I worship you, Jesus. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. 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 And that is who you are.
Draw.
Even when I don't see you, you're working. Even when I don't see you, you're working. You never stop working. Never stop, never stop working. Even when I don't see you, you're working. Even when I don't see you, you're working. You never stop working. You never stop, and that is who you are. 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 Oh, waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Oh, waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Oh.
His image. And I think it's a stunning painting of Jesus. But my friend Greg wrote online that it doesn't really quite seem to convey what the prayer said. That picture doesn't say joy anew to me, but this one does. This one here, Jesus laughing
Breaks
away.
the power
And so I
of
just
sin
wonder
and
if
darkness,
we might be able
whose
to
love is mighty,
in prayer.
so much stronger. King of glory, the King above
If you have,
all
great. If
kings.
not, if you can think of 5 people that you would like to pray for, that would come to
Who
know
shakes the
Jesus.
whole earth with
I guess what
holy
I'd really like us to
thunder and leaves us breathless in awe and wonder. The King of glory, the
Stop
King
seeing Jesus as a
above all
solemn guy
kings.
on the left, and start seeing Jesus
This is
and the joy
amazing
that the
grace. This is unfailing love, that you would take my place, that you would bear my cross, that you lay down your life, that I would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. Who brings our chaos back into order? Who makes the orphan a son and daughter? The King of glory, the King above all kings. Who rules the nations with truth and justice, shines like the sun in all of faithfulness, the King of glory, the King above all kings. This is amazing grace. This is unfailing God, that you would take my place, that you would bear my cross, that you laid down your life, that I would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me.
Lord, we thank you for the words,
Worthy is the Lamb who was slain.
as he says, in Christ.
Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain.
We have in our Saviour, Lord Jesus.
Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy, worthy, worthy is amazing grace. This is unfailing love, that you would take my place, that you would bear my cross, that you laid down your life, that I would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me.
How you have transformed our lives.
Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me.
You have made in our lives to others so they can see the difference.
You sing, Ruth?
Moses led his people through the sea, taking them away from slavery. The Lord was good, the Lord was strong, and Moses lived his life for him.
You love
Ready?
Oh, thank you, that all through history you were faithful. Thank you, oh, thank you, that you are just the same when it comes to me. When it comes to me.
hearts to be receptive to the good news of the gospel.
Well done, Ruth.
David fought Goliath and he won. A humble shepherd boy became a king.
Good
The
relationship.
Lord was good, the Lord was strong, and David lived his life for him.
In Jesus' name.
Daniel was inside a lion's den.
I
God brought
think it
him
would
to
probably be
safety
good for
once
us this
again.
evening just to pray over the
The Lord
situation
was
in
good,
Ukraine.
the Lord was strong, and Daniel lived his life for him.
What we used last week.
Oh, thank you, oh, reading my Bible, and this is what it says to me. It tells me that I'm never ever alone. I'm learning how Jesus came down to us and gave his best. Without a doubt, the best friend you'll ever know. God knows exactly what I need, so I remember this. Let's go! When you ask, he cares. When you seek, he's there. When you knock, 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 God opens up the door. When you ask, he cares. When you seek, he's there. When you knock, 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 God opens up the door.
Well done, everybody. It's quite fast, this one, isn't it?
Are you Bible ready? I'm reading my Bible, and this is what it says to me. It tells me that I'm never ever alone. Rupert, come here. I'm learning how Jesus came down to us and gave his best. Without a doubt.